What would you do if a voice in your head constantly forced you to make embarrassing choices, and you always end up in all kinds of wacky situations but still somehow manage to form a harem of cute but crazy girls? Well, that's exactly what happens to Kanade, an ordinary high school boy who one day finds himself with a curse he calls absolute choice, which forces him to choose between 2 or more choices or suffer unbearable headaches. This curse has caused him to regularly embarrass himself in front of his classmates, earning him a reputation as one of the school's 5 rejects, along with his friend Yuki, a monotone and expressionless girl with a weird sense of humor, and his friend Oka, a hyperactive and carefree tomboy who comes from a rich family. And while socializing with the 2 other rejects, Kanade suddenly suffers an absolute choice, and is forced to choose between taking his shirt off and shouting like a true Japanese man, or taking his pants off and shouting like an Amazon warrior. He wisely chooses the first one, and immediately terrifies his classmates as they witness peak manliness. Until Utage, his pocket-sized teacher, stops him and talks to him privately, where it's revealed that she actually knows about his curse as she also experienced it once before, and she chooses to send him home for the day. But honestly, I'd also run around with my shirt off if it meant I could go home early. On Kanade's way home, however, a strange older lady begins flirting with him, and to make matters worse, he suffers another absolute choice, where he must choose between having a beautiful girl fall from the sky or another strange older lady. The correct choice proves to be a no-brainer as a cute girl falls from the sky and lands right on top of him. To Kanade's annoyance, the beautiful girl quickly makes herself at home by eating all his food, and she explains that although she doesn't remember anything about her life prior to falling, she does know that she's here to help Kanade get rid of his curse. And since she's also forgotten her name, she decides to name herself Chocola after her favorite food. Suddenly, Kanade receives a phone call from someone claiming to be a god, which Kanade of course immediately dismisses as some nut job. So, in order to prove himself a real god, he turns Kanade into a girl with an impressive pair of melons. Having easily convinced Kanade, the god reverts his body back to normal, and informs him that in order to lift his curse, he must complete a series of missions that will be assigned to him, and that he's already sent him Chocola to help along the way. However, should Kanade fail any of the missions, he will have to keep the curse forever. Surprisingly, Kanade has newfound hope that his curse can be lifted, until he asks Chocola for help and realizes that she's completely useless at anything other than eating all his food. He then attempts to kick her out of his house, but an absolute choice stops him by forcing Kanade to choose between leaving his house forever or allowing Chocola to live with him. With no other choice, Kanade now finds himself forced to live with a food vacuum. And on his way to school, Kanade receives his very first mission, which is to make Yuki laugh from the bottom of her heart. But due to her weird personality and monotone demeanor, Kanade considers this mission impossible. Once in class, Kanade suffers another absolute choice, and is forced to squeal like a pig on the teacher's desk, until Utage arrives to spare him his little remaining dignity by once again dragging him off to the teacher's lounge, where Kanade explains his situation with Chocola and the mysterious god. And while thinking back to her own frightening experience with the curse, Utage confirms that the missions are indeed real, and that Kanade must complete them at all costs. The next day, Kanade tries every imaginable meme and joke possible to get Yuki to laugh, but he doesn't even manage to make her crack a smile, despite his best efforts. But after another exhausting and humiliating day, Kanade spots Yuki going up to the school roof, and he chooses to follow her there. However, once on the roof, he witnesses Yuki crying, as she asks herself why she's a weirdo who can't act normally around Kanade. But when she finally notices Kanade, Yuki panics and knocks him out. When he wakes up a few moments later, Yuki is relieved that Kanade has forgotten everything from earlier, and he once again tries to make Yuki laugh. But in the process of doing so, he trips on a banana peel, which causes Yuki to burst out in laughter, and thus accomplishing Kanade's very first mission, much to his relief. But his joy is short-lived, as he wakes up the next day with Chocola in his bed, and receives a new mission: to get a glimpse of Konagi's underwear, who is one of the most popular girls in school thanks to her pure and innocent personality, and who is also Oka's best friend. But when he later runs into both Oka and Konagi, Kanade suffers another absolute choice which forces him to choose between bluntly asking Konagi to show him what's under her skirt, or to trade undies with him. With no great options, Kanade settles for the first choice, and is immediately confronted by Konagi's fan club, who proceed to beat him up. Afterwards, Kanade expresses his surprise to Oka that someone as pure as Konagi would be friends with one of the school's infamous 5 rejects. Kanade is then called aside by Konagi, who explains that she would only show what's under her skirt to someone she loves. And while Kanade basks in her pure and precious heart, he is once again forced by his curse to ask Konagi to show him her undies, and is immediately grabbed by her fan club, who proceed to beat him up once more while one of the boys comments on how juicy Kanade's booty looks. But to Kanade's surprise, Oka offers to help him sneak a peek at her best friend's underwear, and when he asks her why, Oka replies that it just seems like it would be fun. The next day, Oka invites Konagi to hang out as part of her plan to help Kanade. Desperate to complete the mission, Kanade crawls on his hands and knees behind the two girls. But despite the clumsy Konagi falling down several times throughout the day, Kanade can't seem to ever get a glimpse of her goods. At the end of the day, when a tuckered-out Konagi has fallen asleep, Kanade considers flipping up her skirt to sneak a peek, but decides against it to retain what little dignity he has left. Suddenly, a thief makes his way out of the cafe, and Kanade attempts to stop him. But as Oka returns from the bathroom, she performs a flying kick to the thief's face, giving Kanade a glorious view, which somehow completes the mission. Kanade then receives a call from the god, who explains that Oka was accidentally wearing Konagi's undies, which is why Kanade was able to complete the mission. Shortly after, a sudden gust of wind gives Kanade another heavenly sight, and the carefree Oka uncharacteristically runs off in embarrassment, which surprises Kanade. Sometime later, Chocola transfers to Kanade's class and introduces herself as his pet, causing envy from his male classmates who normally ignore Kanade. Suddenly, Kanade suffers another absolute choice which requires him to choose between creating a harem made up of the school's most popular students, or to feel really good. But he ends up choosing harem time, though he wonders why the two choices are good for once. But while Kanade is waiting for his harem to start, a pretty boy bursts into his bathroom stall and starts chasing him. When he is then chased by 3 other men, Kanade realizes that his absolute choice has created him a male harem, and the useless Chocola watches in excitement as her master is assaulted. The next day at school, Sarah, the student council president, and Soko, the vice president, enter the room and challenge Kanade, Oka, and Yuki to a battle between the school's infamous 5 rejects and the school's popular 5. With little effort, Sarah successfully manages to convince the 3 rejects into joining the competition and informs them that their 4th member has already been decided, but they'll need to pick a 5th one themselves. As the student council president leaves, she bumps into Chocola and pets her lovingly, while casually calling Chocola a non-human being, a comment that draws Kanade's attention. Shortly after, Kanade receives another mission from God. This time, his mission is to get all the girls participating in the battle to say they like him, which Kanade knows is impossible. Then at the end of the episode, it's revealed that if Kanade had chosen to feel really good instead of choosing harem time, he would have been put in a coma while daydreaming about being surrounded by beautiful waifus. The next day at school, while talking to Chocola, Kanade realizes that simply getting the girls to say they like him as a person is enough to clear the mission. With this, he quickly gets Oka to say she likes him as a person, but fails to get Yuki to say the same words, even though she secretly wishes she could confess her feelings to him. They then run into Yuragi, Kanade's weird childhood friend who proclaims herself everyone's little sister, even though she acts like an older sister to Chocola. A sudden absolute choice then forces him to act cruel towards her, but she unexpectedly likes it, and says she wouldn't mind being a pet to him. And much to Kanade's annoyance, Yuragi then follows him to his classroom, and Kanade is forced to introduce her to Oka and Yuki, who are both surprised when Yuragi asks them to be her big sisters. Seeing how weird she is, Oka suggests taking Yuragi as their last member for the battle, making Kanade realize that this would make his mission easier, as Yuragi has never said she hates him. But when the girls all hug Kanade in celebration for letting Yuragi join, an angry Yuki attempts to join in on the group hug too, but feels too embarrassed and punches Kanade instead, which earns the admiration of the other girls who are impressed by her strength. Sometime later, the student council president calls all the members from both teams, and Kanade learns that their 4th member is Karasu, a weirdo who never shows their face. The president then explains that in the upcoming battle, each member of both teams will compete in one of 5 events, and whichever team wins more events will win the battle. And during the meeting, Yuragi casually tells Kanade that she likes him without being asked, allowing Kanade to progress further with his mission. Suddenly, Kanade is faced with another absolute choice, and must choose between declaring to everyone that he will get them to say they like him, or to have everyone fall in love with him. But considering that the second option would be far too problematic for everyone involved, Kanade chooses the first option, which startles the girls, but a cheeky smile appears on Sarah's face. The next day, rumors start floating around school that Kanade is a creep who's forcing girls to call him Oni-chan. But Oka praises Kanade for his boldness during the meeting. Yuki's behavior then suddenly changes when she learns from Oka that she's already told Kanade she likes him. And while Yuki is having trouble with her own feelings for Kanade, Kanade decides to target Konagi next for the mission. He asks her directly whether she likes him or not, and she replies that she doesn't not like him. But before she can answer him properly, Kanade is once again taken away by Konagi's fan club. And while he's getting beat up, one of the guys again comments that he loves Kanade's firm peach. When her fan club leaves, Konagi arrives and tells Kanade that she likes him as a person, and leaves shortly after, allowing him to progress further in his mission. But his joy is short-lived, as Konagi's fan club returns to beat him up, with one of the boys far too eager to put his hands on Kanade. Afterwards, Kanade decides to approach Ayame, a member of the Popular Five who is known for her huge melons and cruel personality, and she immediately refuses Kanade's request before even listening to him, but tells him that if he crawls on his hands and knees in front of her, then she'll listen to him. But to her surprise, Kanade does so without a hint of shame. Despite this, Ayame still refuses to listen to him. However, a sudden absolute choice reveals that Ayame's famed milkers are actually made of silicone, a secret which Kanade threatens to expose. With this, he is able to blackmail her into saying she likes him, and Kanade progresses further in his mission. The next day, Kanade goes to a children's show dressed as White Piggy, a popular character which Yuki is secretly a huge fan of. She ends up following Kanade around all day, unaware that he's the one in the costume, and the two end up having fun playing together all day. At the end of the day, Yuki confides in White Piggy that she always ends up saying weird things around a boy in her class because she can't control her feelings for him. In response, White Piggy comforts her and Yuki tells him she loves him, which gets Kanade even closer to accomplishing the mission. Suddenly, he's faced with another absolute choice, where he must choose between removing his White Piggy costume and exposing that he knows Yuki's secret, or to delete his own memory of seeing Yuki's true nature, as well as deleting a secret folder on his computer which contains top-secret research information on the female body. Not wanting to embarrass Yuki, he begrudgingly chooses to have his memory and secret stash erased. That night, Yuki thinks to herself that someday she'll have the courage to tell Kanade how she truly feels. The next day at school, Kanade asks the last remaining girl if she likes him as a person, to which she replies that she doesn't dislike him, and makes a bet that if his team manages to win the battle, then she'll give him a proper answer. Finally, the day of the battle arrives, and the first match is an acting competition between Vice President Soka and Yuragi, but Yuragi is easily able to win the crowd's favor with her cute little sister act. However, when she begins acting like a jealous yandere, her terrifying performance crushes Soka and grants Yuragi the first victory for the 5 rejects. The second match is between Oka and Konagi, who compete in an oil wrestling match, much to everyone's enjoyment. Oka initially dominates the competition, but she ends up slipping while performing her finishing move, and flies out of the ring and onto Kanade, where he ends up seeing another heavenly sight, but this ultimately grants Konagi the victory. The third match is between Ayame and Yuki, who have a contest to see who can come up with the most insulting nicknames for each other. But despite a close match, Ayame eventually wins the competition when Yuki becomes distracted by Ayame's airbags. Kanade then becomes a bit anxious, as the 5 rejects have lost 2 back-to-back matches, and to make matters worse, Karasu has gone missing and is nowhere to be found. But thankfully Chocola is granted permission to participate instead. The fourth match is another insult contest, but the Popular Five's male contestant can't bring himself to insult a lady and forfeits instead, which ties the score 2-2. With this, the final match and the decisive battle is between Sarah and Kanade, who compete in a match of rock, paper, scissors, which Kanade ends up winning, granting the 5 rejects victory over the Popular Five. Sarah then fulfills her side of the bargain by declaring her love for Kanade in front of the entire crowd, which greatly shocks everyone present. But what shocks Kanade the most is when he realizes that his mission is actually not finished yet, since Chocola has replaced one of the participants and must now also tell Kanade she likes him. But since Sarah is clinging onto him tightly and refusing to let go, Kanade has no choice but to ask loudly in front of everyone if Chocola likes him or not. To which Chocola replies that she loves him, surprising Kanade's other female friends, and ultimately completing Kanade's mission. And for his reward, the crowd begins throwing their things at him. After the events of the battle, Kanade becomes infamous around school for being a creepy womanizer, and the jealous boys beat him up at every occasion. Once he arrives in class, he's hugged from behind by Sarah, sparking further animosity from the male students and disgust from the females. Sarah then invites the 5 rejects to a water park, and the group agrees to go, but Yuki feels self-conscious of her flat chest. Kanade then receives a text message informing him that his next mission is to get a picture of Oka crying. That weekend, the 5 rejects and Utage go to the water park, minus Yuki because she declined to go. In order to complete the mission, Kanade and Chocola came up with several plans to make Oka cry, but as a last resort, Kanade plans to put onion extract in a water gun and spray Oka in the eyes. Once at the park, they run into Sarah, Ayame, and Konagi, who decided to come as well, but Sarah mysteriously warns Kanade that slow and steady wins the race, and tells him not to rely on cheats or cheap tricks. While the rest of the rejects play around the water park, Kanade runs into Yuki, who decided to go after all. She acts emotionless as usual despite being self-conscious, but when Kanade compliments her on her swimsuit, she's unable to contain her embarrassment. Kanade then attempts to make Oka cry throughout the day, but is unable to do so. Left with no other choice, Kanade attempts to use his onion extract gun to try and get Oka to cry. But before he can pull the trigger, he suddenly receives an absolute choice which forces him to choose between shooting the gun up his butt or up his nose. As he prepares to shoot up his nose, he laments that he shouldn't have tried to cheat after all. Meanwhile, Sarah watches from a distance and smiles. Later, he and Oka are invited by Yuragi and Chocola to go to the water park's haunted house, famed for its spooky authenticity. Seeing this as another chance to get Oka to cry, Kanade agrees. However, the haunted house proves even scarier than they had hoped, causing Oka to temporarily regress back into a childlike state. So Kanade has to carry her out of the haunted house, and Oka expresses her excitement at being carried on someone's back. Meanwhile, Sarah tells Chocola that her role as Kanade's pet may soon come to an end, which causes her eyes to change color. After a while, Oka returns to her usual self, and she cries tears of joy due to the relief that Kanade was there by her side when she was scared. Sarah then appears and lends Kanade her camera phone, as his was destroyed while inside the haunted house, and he takes a picture of the crying Oka, allowing him to complete another mission. Sarah, who is revealed to have some sort of connection to the gods, then explains to Kanade that the way to get rid of the curse is to fall in love with someone. Elsewhere, Chocola expresses her jealousy to Yuki and Oka because of how close they are with Kanade. He then arrives shortly after, and Chocola declares her love for him. Suddenly, Kanade receives an absolute choice which forces him to declare his love for one of 3 girls, or a 4th choice that says something mysterious will happen at the water park. Not wanting to hurt the other girl's feelings, he chooses the 4th option. He then rushes to Utage and asks her what the 4th choice means, but she simply falls to her knees in horror as she suspects that something terrible is about to happen. Desperate to spare innocent people from whatever might happen, Kanade and Chocola rush to broadcast a warning to the entire water park and encounter various characters from their school along the way. Once they finally make it to the broadcasting room, Chocola tells Kanade that she wants to hear his answer to her confession, but he replies that he doesn't feel the same way about her and that he doesn't want to have half-hearted feelings by forcing himself to be in love. Regardless of this, Chocola says that she still loves him and points out that the microphone was on, much to Kanade's embarrassment. The two then return to the others as it mysteriously begins to snow at that water park, which was actually the 4th choice's result all along. This leads to a massive snowball fight among the water park attendees, and as he and the others play in the snow, Kanade remarks that he will likely be stuck with the curse for a long time, but he hopes to make choices along the way that he doesn't regret. As always, thanks for watching this anime recap, and I hope to see you again soon.